Excellent.
So having said that, oh, no, I've been shutting off these alarms and they still go off. It's amazing to me. How many times have I shut these alarms off? Anyway, good morning, y'all, everyone here. Good afternoon, good evening on the DB2Night show. Rather than playing our famous theme music, today I'm going to play a trombone. This trombone was given to me by Keri, and I've spent some time cleaning it up and trying to restore it. So I thought rather than playing the theme music, I'd play a little bit of trombone. All right, that's enough of that. Hard to play cold, but that's the thing you have to do. When somebody says play, you play. So with that, I'm going to shut off my camera, a bit of bandwidth, and we'll move on and go through the formalities so I can get on to the important stuff, which is Keri. I'm Martin Hubel, of course, and Keri Romanufa of the IBM Labs with us again. Great to see you, Keri. I hope you are doing well.
Yeah, Happy New Year.
Oh, and Happy New Year. Yes, we made it all the way to 2023. This year later on will be the 38th year I worked with DB2. My goodness, it almost seems like a lifetime. But with that, let's move on and get some of these announcements out of the way and the standard things we always talk about. I've removed the, I forgot to remove my phone, it's a story of my life. Twitter, people follow us on hashtag DB2Night, and I know a lot of you do, and that's great for picking up the announcements about the show and the availability of replays, which are now on YouTube, in addition to our old sources of going to our replay blog to pick up things like the PDF, etc. So that's where we are there. Our standard disclaimer, I need to update that another year. It says 2022. I'll fix that after the show. But the standard things on trademarks and replays being available, things being recorded. Our other quick announcements. I've been working on getting the schedule filled up, and I've done a pretty good job for the next few months on the DB2 LUW side. Next month will be Michael Tiefenbacher from Germany, and he's got a series of presentations he's doing on what he calls SQL in action. The one we chose to start with is SQL traps and solutions, and that'll be a great presentation. Most of these have been done at IDUG already, and they're quite good. Also, my friend Phil Nelson is going to be speaking on UDFs in March. And then we have perennial favorite, which is John Hornibrook speaking of optimization and that sort of thing. This time around, it's explain essentials. You know, I've gone to DB2 conferences since November of 1985. And the one thing I've learned is that any number of people always want to learn more about access path selection, indexes, and explains. So it's always good to have the latest and greatest on that area. I've got a couple of ideas for May and June on the LUW side, and we'll fill those in shortly. On the ZOS side, I've been a little slower getting together. That's partly me over the Christmas holidays. We had some rather interesting weather here in Toronto, from very cold and snowy and blowy to right now we're above freezing. Who knew? So here we are in the middle of our supposedly coldest month and darkest month, having some tolerable weather. I guess that's the best term. Next month, later this month, next week actually, Marcus Davidge of BMC in the UK will be talking on a rose light. I think that's going to be an interesting presentation. And I've reached out to the Silicon Valley Lab, and Soumya Kameswaran will be speaking in June on the user experience transformation strategy that they continue to work on. And she's got some new things to talk about in the first half of this year, and she'll be sharing that in June. And I'll be filling in the other dates shortly, and I'll let you know about them. And oh, I've got an April date missing there. I knew there was something wrong with that chart looking at it, but there you go. And As always, the founding sponsor of the DB2Night show is DBI software, and as always, they have a demo available for you to watch. If you do, you get a gift card for doing so, and I encourage you to look into that if you're worried about DB2 performance on DB2 LUW. Our winner for last month's Amazon gift certificate was David Simpson of Huntington Bank. Congratulations, Dave. And the next thing is our sponsors again, DBI and myself. And my comic relief for this week is it's been so cold and blowy. The one thing about our new rescue dogs is they certainly know how to have a good time or where to sleep. And we put the anxiety bed in front of it only holds one dog, but they've managed to put two in it again, and with their toys, and the gas fireplace. So they're when you pick them up out of that, boy, are they toasty. And yes, they're still cute, loving, and they're just a lot of fun. Okay, now we're into the polling section of the day. See what we got here. I guess I hadn't updated this as much as I thought I had. I expected to have the point releases on this slide, so I'm expecting everybody to answer 11.5, and I think we're just going to leave it there. Keri and I were going to go through this, but with one thing and another, we both got here a little late. We do have other people sharing other things, so we've got everybody running 11.5 and a couple of other instances, shall we say, straggling along on some sites. That's typical. The more important DB2 is the more important DB2 is to you, sometimes it takes a little longer to get going. And this is just the standard question on the number of databases that you have in your shop. And just seeing what people manage there. I remember the first time I went up to a car manufacturer. Golly, it had to be nearly 20 years ago. And they said they had well over 100 instances then up in Alliston. And that surprised me at the time, but golly, I think everybody has tons now. They'll share the result on that. Yeah, everybody's managing lots of stuff. 25% of our, actually 33% of our audience has more than 100, and some have more than 1,000 instances. Wow. And is there anything else? Yeah, just this last question here. Our databases run. I guess I should have had this. Well, I guess the way the questions were worded, selecting one answer is just fine. And getting some interesting answers here on what people run in the way of homegrown or packaged applications. And I'll close that off and share the result there. And we've got a big mix here between what people are mostly running or towards packages. And that's interesting to see as well. Okay, I think that's the last polling question I had that gets into our thing right now. So what I'll do is move on, and Keri, you should be seeing my screen again, and I will be switching that over to you right now. I'll let you take it away.
Okay.
Should be seeing that now.
You see my deck full screen?
I do. I have full screen. It looks great.
And echo gone?
No. Echoes. There's no echo on this end.
Oh, it's only an echo on my end. Okay.
Yeah, that's enough just to throw you off while you're talking, right?
Yeah, let me just try to move some speakers around. It oddly just started now and was fine when we were chatting beforehand.
Yeah.
Okay. That seems better.
Good. Now I'm hearing the echo on my end.
I apologize for that. One quick question is, are people going to be able to add to the chat, or are they going to be able to unmute and speak up?
No,
or
there is a question tool built into the GoToMeeting software, and basically what they can do is type their questions in. I can follow the chat there. It's essentially a chat window, and if a question comes along that's that requires your I'll break in and we'll make it.
Okay, perfect.
But in the meantime, I'll mute myself.
Okay.
That might help.
Okay, perfect. I'll get started then. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where people are in the world. My name is Keri Romanufa. Apparently on Twitter, I just inherited the title Head DB2 Nerd. I think my business cards say Chief DB2 Architect, so you know, whatever term you'd like. What I'm here to talk about today is the latest mod pack of DB2, which is 11.5.8, and that came out in mid-October. So we'll talk about the new functionality that's in it, some of the things that you may be interested in starting to use both on application side and engines, and also maintenance side for your databases. Feel free to, like I said, ask any questions. Apparently they go on a chat, and Martin can pipe up and ask. The usual disclaimers, I won't leave these up too long, but essentially for anything new that I'm talking about, which given this is 11.5.8 and is already shipped, there isn't too much of it. And of course, for any performance ones, they're, you know, in lab tests. So mileage may vary. As I said, the plan today is to talk about 11.5.8. I'm going to talk about it in basically three different concepts. One is summary slides. I think anybody who's ever been to a presentation by me, when I've talked about any of the releases or any of the mod packs for all of 11.5.8, I very much use the same format for the summary slides. I'll then get into the deep dives of some of the key features. I'm then going to talk about the CSV streams and how they work and what the plans are going forward. And then for reference, I left the similar summary slides in from 11.5 to 11.5.7. When I've done a longer version of this, I'll get into some of the other details. Given I have about an hour, they're there for reference and partially to show how much we've shipped over the last 3 years in our continuous delivery model. So let's get kicked off with the summary. The 11.5.8, so, you know, the highlights of what shipped there. You'll see the very much, especially if you go into the other ones, we've had a lot of the same hills and focus areas across the 11.5 release. The hybrid and multi-cloud, so this is where, you know, our containerization support, you know, Docker in some of the early releases, and DB2 as the focus going forward. One of the key things, and this wasn't tied to 11.5.8 because the containerization's on a slightly different schedule, but things we have done over the last 6 months since, or at least maybe even since 11.5.7. Red Hat OpenShift on AW and Azure, so Rosa and Arrow support. Being able to deploy on Amazon EKS and deploy on Azure AKS. In addition to that is integration with Valero for backup and restore. And like I said, these aren't necessarily tied to 11.5.8 specifically, but picking up that level of containerization. The Amazon and the Azure actually came in summer, and we announced them at IDUG North America. Under application development, multi-row fetch, we've added a new reg bar to force consistency in how we do our counts with the Z behavior. You know, it isn't on by default because we didn't want to change the default behavior, but I actually, in many ways, like the behavior better. So it's something, especially if you're looking at new applications, you might want to think about setting that, even if you aren't looking to match behavior. As with every mod pack, we have a large number of enhancements for our federation. You know, there's basically generally two types of things we add, one of which is performance enhancements, and the other of which is support for, you know, new levels. So under performance improvements, we made enhancements to fetch first n rows and push down for Impala with JDBC. Mongo, we added SSL authentication and multi-host, and similar for HANA and ODBC. And we also added MySQL 8 support to get up to, supporting newer levels. Again, lots of client enhancements. JCC, we've improved the connection pooling. We have larger result set query performance. We've updated to the JDK 17 runtime and also NetVisual Studio 2022 support. And DB2DS driver, a tool to help validate that you set up and configured the file properly. Just for people's understanding, the ones that are bolded are the ones that have detailed slides matching. So I won't go into as much detail here and go into them when I go into the summary slides. But under Columnar, we made big improvements to load performance, and like I said, I'll talk about those in detail. But it both improved performance, and it also allowed some bar chart level compression enhancements that we added earlier in 11.5 to be enabled for load. One thing that you may have seen me talk about in past ones is talking about a logical columnar backup. You may have heard it called COISPAR or schema backup. That was originally only available in DB2 IIS and DB2 Warehouse. That's now available even for Linux, AMD, and PPC LE across all installs, so whether it's container or on-prem. And under cognitive and emerging, we've been continuing to do some enhancements to the graph support we have, improving the GUI, adding tutorials to make it easier for customers to follow and understand what's going on, and also to be able to see some of the value of using graph compared to, I'll say just programming only in SQL, and even some of the visualization tools that are available to help you look at your data when you're running graph and Gremlin queries. Continuing on 11.5.8, three other core areas and hills we had was availability. One of the ones is the DB280 UTL tool. That can now load copy files to TSM. Like I said, it's bolded, so there's further details as we go. We've added the ability for the log read API to map timestamp to LSN. This can be used by any logical replication tool and is used by our own QRep to improve how it restarts log reads. We made some log replay improvements, and so that impacts everything, including HADR, roll forward, and crash recovery. And we've added some documentation for some reg bars we've had for tuning in the past that we've kept internal, but now we've added better recommendations and support for those tuning parameters. GUI and silent installs for Pacemaker. So one of the things I've talked about in detail in a number of the decks for 11.5 is adding support for Pacemaker in replacement of TSA in a number of cases. Sorry, I don't know why it just paged up a bunch or down a bunch. And one of the, in previous releases, we were supporting it for install, but we were adding it for the GUI install and the silent installs. Improvement deployment for DB2 HADR and AWS, Azure, and GCP, so added automation and documentation improvements. Pacemaker support for mutual failover on single node. And so this is another case where, like I said, we basically have a roadmap to be able to do all of the things that we use TSA for automation and failover, to actually, start using Pacemaker as a choice in the 11.5 stream. And so what we support for now is mutual failover on a single node. And this is something people call either active passive failover with shared storage, i.e. you have common storage and you basically fail over from basically DB2 processing that connected and processing to that storage on machine A to be able to fail over to machine B and take over that storage. PureScale, again, lots of focus on PureScale in the 11.5.8 stream. A big one that came out in summer and again was announced at IDUG North America was PureScale with TCP/IP on AWS. This is something that, we've seen a lot of uptake and interest from our customers. One of the big keys here is it takes deployment of PureScale from, getting the boxes and, specific hardware and cards, which could take, some amount of time to order, set up, cable, to the ability to deploy it in less than 40 minutes, ability to choose cluster sizes. If you're interested in PureScale and you're interested in AWS, there are a number of sort of 1-hour demos and presentations out there. Strongly recommend that for anyone who's interested. Another big one, and I do have a slide on it, is when RHEL 8 came out, it no longer supported how we did RDMA and only supported it via verbs. So one of the things we've been working on is the changing our infrastructure to be able to support RDMA on RHEL 8 and going forward. So we added support for 8.6. I'll talk about in that some of the other benefits in a little bit more detail. Simpler concurrent PureScale online mod pack and fixed pack updates. Again, I have a detailed slide, so I'll talk about that. Another one is we came out with Z-Linux support earlier this year. And one of the things we did is we changed the default for direct IO to be on by default in Z-Linux. And, this is something I would say are the types of things we don't normally change in a fixed pack, but every customer we've been working with, we've been flipping it on for them. So it's a much better default, helps improve performance, reduces overhead, and we very much understand the customer base to know everybody's running it, and we really want everybody to run it going forward, especially as you'll see the last one I talk about is between 11.5.8 and end of year, we added Z15 support. So, as we're getting more customers on Z-Linux on PureScale, we want them to start with the right defaults. Other things, we had a periodic collection of RDMA round-trip network stacks, and we basically track them, and we can use them, both for your information and basic monitoring information, but also for performance and PD, because there are times that people will see blips in performance, and the first question is it something with DB2 unlocking or logging, or is it something simply in the network where something bogged the network down to slow things? And we can see that with this data. And we also had the ability to avoid some lock times out due to EHL. And with this, you can turn it on and basically say the priority. If you have a low lock timeout set and EHL takes longer than that to flip in, you can, if you're waiting for EHL related locks, they won't time out. Under Core Engine, we added additional logging for XML data, and this is when change data captured is used, and it's used by log replay. And at the same time, we added support via QREP. So rather than, if you have XML, having to go back to the server to get the data, you will actually find that the XML data is fully logged. And there are specifics for this, for how much data we will log. Much like with LOBs, it's not a size at which we quit, but it allows you to dramatically improve performance if you're running. Okay, I should say that it will change how your performance works. You're never going to go back to the server. And, especially your replay performance is going to improve. Ultimately, you're going to be logging at the runtime versus necessarily coming back and asking for the query twice. So it's going to probably save you IO, but probably cost you, the log IO, but saves you the read IOs later. We added new amend command to be able to shut down an FMP process. We've added external table support to be able to read the binary numeric format. This is, it's not the most common format, but it's something that exists in the DB2 family. So we can now read that data. We extended the DB2 remote storage alias remote storage manager tool to use storage aliases. So this is, part of our object store support. A big one is adding support for TLS 1.3, especially, the life of our releases, tends to be long. So we wanted to get the latest TLS support in. Forcing the load of GSKit, to force it to the client to be able to load the level that comes with DB2. I'll talk about that a bit more in detail. And also to be able to monitor some SSL information with the MonGet connection. One of the things we try to do in every mod pack and is improve anywhere, based on what we've seen for, support calls and areas we can improve serviceability and make it easier for our customers. Both in our catalog and our process model, we've improved the serviceability. And that's improving the types of things we dump, and especially with text search, we've actually changed our DB2 support to automatically gather text search logs, so it's not something we have to go back and ask for, and that's going to help improve time to resolution. As I said before, GUI and sign-in installs can now install Pacemaker. We updated Java, TSA, GPFS, and Pacemaker levels, along with obviously the new DB2 code levels, and a big one for people who use Windows is Windows 2022 support. I'm going to pause for a second just to make sure that Martin is not going to jump in with any questions.
I have some questions for you, or just
okay.
One, and it says, does this help also with the logs and change data capture, or just the column attribute with XML only?
So what it does is, if you are sorry, I'm starting to get feedback again. Yeah. So okay, perfect. Yeah. So what this does is, specifically, if you have XML data, you have change data, and by XML data I mean native, not Clob or Blob where you're doing anything yourself, but you're storing in our native XML format. You have change data capture on, and you turn on a reg bar because it's not on by default. Prior to this, we would not have logged the data, right? And what was happening before is that saves you the logging of the data at runtime, but when you go to replay the logs, you basically have a log record that says, I did an insert. And what QRep would do is it would call back to DB2 and say, you did an insert, go get me what's the latest version of this data. And then it would basically take that data and do an insert, right? And what's happening now is we are going to log it when change data capture is on, and like I said, there are limits to the size to which we log. But then when QRep goes to replay, it doesn't need to go back to the server, right? So you're trading extra logging for not having to go back to the server, not having to requery that data, what could be much later in time, and cause the extra I/O. So you are trading one type of I/O for another. But, if for some reason the server is down, you still have the data because it's in the logs to replay. You don't have to go back and ask for something that, maybe you can't get to, or, maybe if you're at a really busy time running queries, you could be slower trying to get that data from the server, right? So you've got the benefits there. But there will be more logging and more log space used, and that depends somewhat on the size of your data. Next question?
Nope, that was it. Thanks.
Oh, okay, perfect. So dropping into the summary details, the first one I'm going to talk about is forcing the GS kit that came with, the DB2 driver. Currently, in the client, we load in the following order. The first is we load it by an unqualified name. So whatever is set up to be, the one would be found first is picked up. And if there isn't anything, then we're going to load from the fully qualified DB2 path. And this load order means that, if you have set something else up in your path, you're going to find it first. And sometimes these old ones can be this other one can be very old and end up being problematic if it's outdated. So now we have the ability through the DB2DS driver or the DB2CLI files to be able to set it up to basically says load stock, which basically means what comes with DB2. One comment is if you are running DB2 through the client through some other product which has already loaded it, don't set it to stock because they want to run with their level, not be overridden by the DB2 level. And the other comment is this doesn't change the server, this only changes what the client does. But it basically allows the ability to go directly to the fully qualified path and avoid possibly picking up an outdated level you don't want. TLS 1.3 support. One of the key things here is I'll actually start with the bold on the bottom. And, this is not on by default. And the number one reason is okay, it's not on by default for the server. The number one reason is the bottom is if you have old clients that do not support, being able to, at 1.2, you will not be able to connect once 1.3 is enabled. This is a mod pack, so we very much don't want to have to break people and force them to move up. Below is the list of the older levels. So if you're running, fixed pack 9, fixed pack 4 or 3 or earlier for those levels, and I'll say I hope you don't, and I believe nobody clicked 10.1 as levels being run, but they did click 10.5, and maybe that also didn't list client levels. So this is something that you can, and especially depending on your level of security, you can turn on and should turn on if you want the latest level of TLS, but you need to make sure that you're not going to be connecting with old clients, otherwise they will fail. So on the server, like I said, it's off by default in 11.5.8. In the C client, it's on by default because that's where you're connecting with, and that's where the automatic sort of downgrades can happen. The Java client depends on the JDK level and needs configuration. HADR primary standby, similar to the sort of client server. The receiver is off by default in 11.5.8 because again you don't want to cause any mismatches. The sender is off by default. KMIP, it's on by default in 11.5.8. And there are some, if you're using it, there are some new restrictions. You can't use, what are, I'll say, the less secure signatures and key sizes. So no SSA1, SSA224 signatures, and no RSA key less than 2048. And like I said, this is something how quickly you move up probably is often going to be dependent on, your company's own internal policies and, how quickly they want you to get to the latest levels and how much older things you have lying around. Mon-get connection, we've added the following message. You can see the TLS version. You can see the cipher spec that's negotiated. You can see the label name and the fingerprints when connection was established. We've also added this to DB2 PD applications. So it's just information that's handy for you to see, especially if you want to see what level of clients are connecting, you can see that. On to PureScale, RDMA support for RHEL 8. So I talked about this, and the motivation was RHEL 8 moved support for UDAPL and supported only at the verbs layer. And we, since the start of PureScale, have started at UDAPL and let that interface with verbs. So we have to basically push DB2 down a layer to talk directly to verbs. So, the good news of this is it really drops one layer out, and that usually means one less layer to, cause either overheads or, potentially, sometimes, and we found very few problems in it, but, there have been bugs in the UDAPL code itself, and talk directly to the verbs layer. Early on, we thought we might see performance benefits, and, it has most part been small and not noticeable. But the big one is it very much allows us to support UDAPL on the latest level of RHEL. so we started support 8.6, and that's in the 11.5.8. As I mentioned, it reduces third-party code dependencies, so there's a whole layer of code that's not being used. And it's also the foundation for future, and I have a typo there, RDMA support on cloud. Each of the clouds have their own sort of flavor to RDMA. So by dropping a layer lower and also sort of getting into some code that I'll say we haven't been in because we haven't changed the UDAPL and how we just talk to it since we originally built some of this. We also built in the support to be able to support, say, AWS's EFA and things like that. And let me rephrase that. We don't support it yet. We built the infrastructure to be able to add support to the different versions of RDMA going forward. PureScale concurrent online update. So this is something we added the first steps of this, I'm going to say in 11.5.6, where what we first allowed to do was the ability to do them online. And to do, members in parallel and, understand what is the best way to get especially a large cluster, fully updated across all members in CFs quickly. And we added the base support in previous mod packs, and what we added is really the full automation of it. So we added 3 new options, and I'll sort of go into them for reverse order. The first one is you can run something that says show update order. And that basically says, tell DB2 to tell us what it would do, but don't actually do it. Right? So this is basically a way to preview what DB2 chooses to, what sets it chooses to update it at once. You can minimize the concurrency, and you can do that. Let's say if you have a 7-member cluster, you can actually say you only want to do, say, 2 hosts at a time because you don't want to drop too much computing power out at once. Or you can leave that off and basically say, I want it to happen, take as many members as you can at once so it takes the least number of steps to get us updated. And then the final one is actually the auto update. And that basically says, DB2, I trust you to update the entire cluster in what you think is the I'll say easiest and fastest set of possible sets. Often it requires 3 because you often need to maintain quorum, so you can't take down, exactly half. So you'll take down slightly less than half, slightly less than half, and then a little bit. But if you want to see what how DB2 would do it, it also deals with making sure you always keep a CF. Your show update order will do that. And like I said, you can choose to limit the concurrency if you want to do it in more sets to ensure that more members stay up and you have higher, throughput through that time frame. So, something that very much eases the DBAs and makes it simpler for DBAs to update clusters. Load copy file support for TSM. So this one came in as an RFP, and actually I think the first one did too for the support for GSKit. The objective here is to ensure that all images that may be needed for recovery, and that's both restore and roll forward, and that includes HADR, can be in TSM. We did 2 things to this. One is we updated the DB280 UTL tool to support copying files to TSM. So we added new syntax. Some old syntax is now undocumented and it still works, but we want people to start using the new syntax where you can basically say you want to suspend, send the load copy or backup or logs. So, image which used to imply backup or logs is still supported. And also the and remove means we would delete them at the end of the copy if you don't want them kept locally. The second part of this is now that they're in TSM, we want them used by the recovery and have that done automatically. So what we did here is we added a new reg var, which will allow you to, define where you're going to look for the images. The first place we look is if you go, the log record will log where it believes the load copy image is. That was the first place we look. The second place we look is in the history file entry. And finally, if TSM is configured, we will look there if we have not found it in one of the first two places. So again, this is ease of use, allows you to ensure that everything you need for recovery is up in TSM and that we automatically pull from it. So again, makes life easier for the management and your ability to roll forward in HADR. Pausing slowly for questions, but I'll assume Martin will cut in if he needs to.
No new.
Okay. The next one is for columnar tables. In 11.5.4, I talked about us adding new compression algorithms. Improved compression algorithms means your storage on disk is going to reduce, so your overall cost of running your database reduces. The two new compression things we added is, one is what I'll call repeating pattern-based compression. This works well for geospatial data, URLs, comment fields, anywhere where patterns of data tend to repeat itself, right? So, if you're putting in ordered names, you have comments fields that are commonly things like, unknown or, even city names and things like that. The repeating pattern is going to be able to pick those up. The compression rates typically are 2 to 4 times, but let's be clear, it totally varies based on frequency and length of patterns. If you have default things that just kind of drop in, based on different click things and that, you can get higher. If your data is random or you happen to be sending in, otherwise encrypted data, then you may find it never kicks in. And then the second one is something called nibble-based compression. And, this is going after a very specific pattern of data. So one of the things that tends to be common is, even though they're character fields, people often use them for, I'll say generally numeric things are the most common, because if you use them for a real character, you're going to have, or real character fields, you're going to, at least in the English language, at least 26 things on an average page. But if you're looking at especially numerics and coordinates, you tend to have digits 0 to 9, maybe you have a plus or minus or a bracket or a comma, but what happens is very often you're really only using 16 unique characters in those types of fields. And if we have those types of that data, we will recognize it, and essentially we can get 2 times compression, and that's a fixed thing because of the way we store it. So especially for these types of things, the amount of data you require to store it will not drop in half. This compression is both on disk and in the buffer pool. So it also saves you memory for what you're caching. In 11.5, so actually in general, both of these are off by default for on-prem. They require a new registry variable to enable, and this is because we want customers to explicitly turn them on, because the moment you start using them, you can't drop back a fixed pack because the old levels don't understand the compression algorithm. So strongly recommend turning these on once, if you're running columnar data and you get to a level that you're not going to drop the fixed pack back. Some people like the flexibility to do that, but like I said, you wouldn't be able to read these columns on an old level, and you get an error basically saying, data is not readable. But strongly recommend you would turn these on. The other place is once you're on, they've been in there since 11.5.4, so even once you're in 11.5.5, you can drop back to 11.5.4 to support that. So let's go back to 11.5.8. What did we change? So when those compression algorithms were originally added, they were originally supported for bulk inserts, but they weren't supported for trickle feed or load. In 11.5.6, when we came out with the trickle feed enhancements, they were now supported for trickle feed, or what we call small inserts. And what was missing was load support. So in 11.5.8, we added support for those with load. And there were actually two improvements that came. The first one is actually load itself for using the bulk insert that we introduced to 11.5.GA under the covers and some of the infrastructure there for setting things up. And that itself simplifies and streamlines load. That is on by default, and that on its own can show you performance enhancements. Secondly, through that reuse, it allows the two new compression algorithms to be used. And load will only use those if they're enabled. So if you didn't enable them before, they're not going to kick in. If you have them enabled, then load will automatically use them. And this can result in better compression, which in itself can also improve performance of both the load itself and also your queries because you have less data to read. In lab tests, we get 0 to 15% depending on data types loaded because, like I said, it is specific to string data. And, how much compresses the disk speed and even just the benefits of the, infrastructure enhancements. And just to show you some data, both it can impact, like I said, table size, and it can also impact performance, which I'll show next. So here are just some examples. The blue is the base table and how much it shrunk in size, and the yellow or orange is the synopsis table. So you'll see that, and if you look at the base table to the synopsis table, the base table is usually a couple orders of magnitude larger, so it's probably the one you really want to focus on. But in some cases, the table was not quite half the size, but 40% smaller. There were some cases where it didn't help, and some cases where it helped the synopsis, even though it didn't help the base table. And part of that comes down to, like I said, again, it is based on what data. So, substantial reduction in size of some of your tables, especially, like I said, it is specific to strings. And speed, here we've seen some of them, not change performance. But we've also seen upwards of, 10%, 16%. And like I said, those are both tables with and without having the bar charts, because like I said, there is some base performance enhancements to the code, not just for the reduction in size of bar charts. So like I said, the load part is on by default. Strongly recommend you turn on the Columnar load enhancements. There's actually a white paper out there that I should probably have put in a link to here, but it talks about what are the recommended values across the board in the latest 11.5.8, so what you should be using for Columnar. Those are actually defaults to on if you're using Warehouse and Warehouse on Cloud, but like I said, they don't default to on-prem just because we don't want to impact your ability to drop back to a fixed spec level. Next one I'll talk about, just doing a time check. Do you have any more polling questions, Martin?
Nope, we're
okay.
You're doing a great job.
Okay, perfect. I just want to make sure. So I have the rest of the 25 minutes?
Yeah, we'll take the rest of the questions at the end. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, you can still jump in with questions. I just wanted to make sure there was. Sometimes you do more polling or more.
Well, people have to write them in, and today
we're
just listening. That's good.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Logical backup and restore. And again, this is something you've probably seen me talk about before, but say comment that it is limited to where IIS and Warehouse on Cloud. You might have heard me call it schema backup and restore, schema bar, COIS bar. One thing I just want to put a quick thing is it was tech preview in GA. There's an APAR that added support for it in the CSB stream. I meant to look up at that APAR, and apparently since I have XXX, I forgot. I'll add that to the slides before I send them out to Martin to post, or people can, I have emails up front. You can ask me if you need to see it. So what is logical schema backup and restore? It is basically, our regular DB2 backup is what I will call a physical backup. It basically takes the pages on disk, regardless of data type, whether it's data, index, log, long, and basically stuffs them in the backup. and when you restore them, it basically puts them on disk exactly how they were before. You know, there are pros of that in terms of simplicity and speed and the ability to, you know, take that and roll forward to points in time. But there's also downsides of that, for example, if you are running in DPF and you back up 10 nodes, you have to restore to 10 nodes because, you know, we have no way to take those physical pages and, you know, split the data on it to different, I'll say, you know, objects for the different partitions. And with the logical backup, it is much more table unload and then, you know, basically reloads of data. And because it's working at a data level, it's agnostic to the setup. So whether it's DPF or you know, single node, you know, it will reload to whatever, you know, format you want. I will mention it supports Columnar tables only. It's cross-platform. With Linux and PPCLE in 11.5.8, you know, in the future we may expand that to other platforms. It's agnostic, like I said, to the setup. You can start at some number of nodes and restore into some other nodes because it is basically based on external table unload and load. Your backup is the granularity of a schema, although when you restore, you can pull out just single tables. Because it basically works on AT, which is essentially, you know, SQL based. It's subject to all SQL rules in terms of WLM and config. You are allowed rewrite access to the tables during backup, and you can also be used for easy table schema from production to test. So it's not simply for, say, DR or recovery purposes, but, you know, because your test and your production may be of different number of nodes, you can actually back up your, you know, 100 node warehouse and restore it to a, you know, even single node or even couple node warehouse to be able to test. I don't go into this in detail here just because, you know, I know time-wise I usually end up short. But again, you know, we do have full decks on it if you're interested. You know, the documentation is there for what's supported in the 11.5.8 stream. You know, if you're looking for ways to move the column or tables and to do it where, and another thing I should mention is you know, there is incrementalness to it where you can back it up and then do the next incremental. So it's something for, I would say, a lot of Columnar customers are really interested in, and for not just DR purposes, but even production tests. You know, copying to other setups. So something for people to start looking into. So that ends my deep dive. Any questions? I'll do a last set of questions before I go and talk about, you know, what our CSV streams are. I'm guessing most people are somewhat familiar with it because I saw the majority of the people voted they were on 11.5 already. So hopefully it's not completely new. But I'm going to talk about what's happening with 11.5.8 going forward. And I will continue because I don't hear Martin breaking in.
You're doing fine.
Yep. So when I presented 11.1, I would say it was the bigger change from 10.5 because we hadn't had a continuous delivery model before. You know, prior to version 11, and you know, with 30 years of history, you know, things vary slightly, but, you know, at a summary level, I would say, generally speaking, we would ship the GA that would have 90% of the function that we have allowed to have in that. And, you know, on paper, we probably planned to have it be 100%. But, you know, a few things might have tailed out. So maybe some things were shipped in the first one or two fix packs. Depending on year, sometimes people were absolutely no function in fix packs. Sometimes people were, you know, the few things can stray. But, you know, our intent was very front loaded. With 11.1, we started a continuous delivery model where we basically said, you know, there is a plan that for some number of years, and, you know, I can tell you for neither 11.1 or 11.5, we knew exactly how long that would be when we started. And I would say it's changed a few times from what we maybe thought when we initially started is there would be some number of years and some number of mod packs where we would plan to ship new function before we jump to the next level. 11.5 follows that continuous delivery model. And, as if you saw in my summary on the previous page, we basically had 11.5.0, 1, 2, and 3 were container only. 4, 5, 6, and 7 were all specific to, for on-prem and containers. And it was about a little over 3 years, 3.25 years, 3.5 years of new features delivered into the 11 stream. And what we've done for numbering changed between the 11.1 and the 11.5. So originally, we did not reset the fixed pack level to 0. And that's something we did just easier to tell things apart and to also get rid of those interim special builds we basically had in the 11.1 stream. And throughout the life of both of 11.5 and even I'd say 11.1, we tried 2 different options. One is fixed packs if we were going to do only fixes, and that's just incremental. And we up the fixed pack level. We only did that once in the life of the 11.5 stream so far. And the other one, which is what we have been essentially doing since 11.5.4, is having a CSB stream, or cumulative special build. Some people will call it continuous special build, where there's actually no numbering, but things are numbered as special builds. And like I said, we have maintained this since 11.5.4, and it's when customers have asked for pushes for fixes, what we give to them. Now, one of the first things that usually happens is someone says, what's the difference between the CSB versus the past special builds? So how are they alike? They both are how customers get APAR fixes, and I'm going to say ASAP. If you're in them, between 11.5.7 and 11.5.8, I would say it was the true ASAP. You needed it in sort of weeks to months, and 11.5.8 was not coming out. But going forward, it will be ASAP in terms of before our vNext is out. And they both are identified by special build IDs versus a change in mod or fixed pack level. So how do they differ? And I'll call this why is the CSB much better? The C stands for cumulative or continuous, and this means when you get one of those builds, it has all of the APAR fixes we fixed since the last mod pack, including the security ones, right? So if you're getting a fix for X, you will automatically get all the security fixes that are in the stream. Rather than being a special one-of, for a customer, any and all customers pick up the same stream, right? The security special build is really just a CSB with all of those fixes. So not only do you get those security fixes, you also get the cumulative stream and any of the APARs fixed. And being continuous stream, it also gets continuously tested, right? It's not a one-of that someone's, hand testing and, doing some small amount of testing. It gets our continuous pipeline, our functional, some performance and stress tests, versus, what was minimal testing decided per fix. And then once it was sent, it was never fixed again, right? We're testing, every time we're doing these builds. And then, so what does that really mean for our customers? To me, if a customer is installing a new DB2 instance or moving up to 11.5, we actually recommend you pick up the latest CSB stream because that gets you all the latest fixes, right? So do we still have the ability to do one-of? The answer is yes. They're called an unofficial special build, but they're almost exclusively used for debug code, or sometimes if there's a partial fix that we need to get something to the customer ASAP, but it's not a fix that's necessarily applicable to, we have done, I'll say, something based on what we know the customer's use case is, but we're going to need a wider fix before it goes in, we may send the partial fix to help the customer out with the plan to put in the full fix into the official special build. So what does that mean going forward? So 11.5.8 is targeted to be the last the last mod pack in the 11.1 stream for all our customers. But going forward, that means we're going to rely on fix packs. We're going to rely on the CSP stream with, I'll say, no planned fix packs, and there's a small start of that, and I'll get to that in the next pages. But fix packs simply are meant to manage APARs together, right? So what they're good for is they're good as a periodic encouragement to move up, right? Because we do have customers who say, when is this next fix pack coming out? Because when it comes out, I'm going to move up. So some customers see that as sort of here's a bunch of fixes, they're all packaged together. And to some people, it gives a target date or level to move up or to justify to management to move up. So again, it's here's a package set. And the downside of that is the dates often don't align with when customers want to move up, right? So, something that I'll say happens all too much, and, people who know me is I tend to put in disclaimers when I know that something's not a, committed date. But, someone will say, when is the next fix pack? And someone else will say, well, it's targeted for, end of first quarter. And then somebody makes plans starting in April to move up to the fix pack. And then for some reason, the, date slips and then, people have to, change their down level schedules, right? And so one of the advantages of CSPs is there's always a latest level of code, right? And, one of the things, the other downsides of the fixed pack stream is the moment it comes out, okay, maybe it's a day or a week after it comes out, there's probably another APAR fix already that, is improving DB2. So it's always stale, right? So, if we have 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, or, we end up even being farther out, if you look at the history of 11.1 between the fixed packs, there's always more good things that people want, but they're not necessarily available for all customers without requests for special builds. So, as an example of this is in 11.5.8, late in their release, and it's a couple months before, we actually quit pulling in the latest APARs. And that means the day we shipped 11.5.8, we actually shipped a CSP on 11.5.8 that caught up on all of the APARs that had been fixed in those handfuls of, in those few months. And therefore, there was, what I will argue was, in many ways, a better version of 11.5.8 that had 50 APAR fixes the same day, right? And that's goodness that allows our customers to pick that up. With the main benefit of that is the same issues tend to be hit multiple times by customers. And if you can get everyone picking up the latest, they can get the benefits of that, and will actually lower the number of people who multiple hit some subset of the APARs. All right, so those are some of the big benefits of relying on the CSP stream. And like I said, the CSP stream solves most of those issues. It allows customers to pick up what is the latest level of code, at their own pace. The ability to, avoid already fixed things by picking that up, and also tying it better to the way our P-certs come in. And, rather than getting special builds that may not have had the P-certs or other fixes, those are automatically included. Now, I'll admit there's some work, and I'll say education to this is, people are used to sort of that flag of, it's this period of time, we have that new fix pack, you should be picking it up. We've talked through our tabs and through customers, at what interval do we really, and I'm going to use the word sort of promote the CSPs. The range has sort of been, I'll say, 1 to 3 to 6 months of, how we're going to say, recommend these, with priorities on the security ones, right? and how to document them as sort of promoted or suggested levels. We're going to start having that information available, and basically have it documented that this is the suggested level to pick up if you're, say, moving to 11.5.8. That will be true for 11.5.7 for the near term too. And of course, you can still go and ask for what is the absolute latest, or maybe that has some specific fix you're interested in. Some new steps that we're going to need to go with that is we need to ensure the APARs are updated to include the CSV levels fixed in. So this is something we're changing our tooling, because today they would only say, if we're fixing something in the 11.5.8 CSV, it normally would not show up as essentially fixed, I'll say, until V12, and even that handles APARs differently. We need to ensure they're published. So that's something that, we publish them early, but they're not necessarily pushed out until the mod packs and the fix packs push out. So that's something we're going to change going forward, so you can see the actual list of fixes. We're going to make sure that there's the documents that say what level to pick up and use. This one, we actually had some feedback to call it something other than CSVs. I'll say right now that's not in plan, because sometimes those things are harder to change than it seems. And just because to differentiate it from the previous special builds. And we also have document that talks about, some of the fix pack things for rolling updates and that, and, we'll have to make sure that those are properly documented with the new CSVs. This is something that, feel free to send feedback on. You'll start seeing these new steps over the next handfuls of months for, the recommendation. And like I said, there's going to be some, I'll say, that 1 to 3 month range, that's going to, or, even like I said, some people said 6, some people said 1, that's going to vary as we go and see what customer feedback is, what levels people are picking up. And, it's going to be somewhat based on experience and what feedback we get from you guys. So I actually finished 7 minutes early, which is, people who know me, a little bit of a shock. But thank you for everyone who's shown up. And there is reference material in the back for anybody who wants it. And I guess I have 7 minutes for questions if anybody wants to type them in. I don't know if the chat can be opened or not, so they may have to be typed.
Yeah, we have to type them in with the webinar format we have. It also, a number of people on today. It's really good. We were up around 25 to 30 people on at the peak.
Excellent.
Yeah. So let me take back control here. I just need to do that. Myself the presenter. Now we'll wrap up here. And looking at questions, well, if not, we actually did pretty well. We like to end between 12 and 12:15 Eastern time, so we can get off lunch. So thanks, Keri. Great job as always. And people.
You're welcome. Thank you for organizing.
Yep.
And I'll cache this spare 7 minutes for the future time where I go over.
Yeah, that's all right. It happens to us all. Well, have a great weekend. I'll start the regular music. I could bring out the trombone again, but I don't think I need to do that. The old saying goes is, that's really fun. You've got a trombone. Play me something. Now stop.
Yeah, well, I will say that nobody left the call while you were playing your trombone, and, now as people sign off for lunch, it would look bad, so it's safer not to. And if I played the trombone, people would bail quickly.
The definition of a gentleman is somebody who knows how to play the trombone and doesn't. So with that in mind, I'll cue the music up. Thank you again for a great job. We'll look forward to getting the replay blog out and the slides. So have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week for our first Z show of 2023 with Marcus Davidge. Thanks all.
And thank you to everyone who joined.
Thanks to our audience, always. Thank you, Keri. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.